Today, we're diving into a really timeless question, one that I think we've all asked ourselves. Why do we get stuck? Stuck in the same old patterns. We're going to explore an ancient framework that, believe it or not, gives a surprisingly clear answer to this very modern feeling. Let's get into it.
You know that feeling, right? Where you just react to something in a totally automatic way, and you're left thinking, wait, where did that even come from? You just go through the motions, make the same choices, and somehow you always end up in the same familiar place, almost like you're not the one steering the ship.
Well, it turns out this isn't just some weird quirk of our busy modern lives. Nope. Thousands of years ago, ancient Indian sages were looking at this exact same phenomenon. They were deeply investigating it, and they didn't just notice it. They gave it a name and mapped out the whole system. And the problem they identified, this universal human condition of being caught in a loop, they called it samsara. Now, this isn't just some abstract philosophical idea. It's their description of the human experience itself. So what is samsara, really? The texts define it as this relentless, endless cycle of birth, death, and then rebirth. Picture a giant wheel that just keeps on turning, life after life. But what keeps the wheel spinning? What's the fuel? Well, that's where our next big idea comes into play. The engine of this whole cycle is karma. Now, a lot of us think of karma as, some kind of cosmic scoreboard for good and bad deeds. But its literal meaning is much simpler. Action, that's it. It's the universal law of cause and effect. Every single action we take, especially when it's driven by our intentions, creates a ripple that keeps us moving forward inside this cycle. Okay, so if karma is the fuel, what's the internal engine that decides which actions we take in the first place? To really understand why we're on autopilot, we need to pop the hood and look at the mechanics of our own minds.
And this is where it gets really, really interesting. The texts talk about these things called samskaras. The best way to think of them is like deep grooves or channels carved into your mind by every past action and experience. And over time, these grooves become our default pathways. They become our habits, our personality, our automatic reactions. And this shows perfectly how we get stuck in a loop. It all starts with a vasana. That's a deep-seated tendency, like a latent desire that just bubbles up from those samskaras. This vasana then creates a specific desire, or kama. That desire pushes us to act, and that action is karma. But here's the kicker. That very action then reinforces the original tendency, carving that mental groove even deeper. It's a perfect self-perpetuating cycle. I just love this metaphor from one of the source texts. It's so vivid. Just like a stream of water will always, naturally, fall into the deepest rut it's already carved on a mountainside, our thoughts and impulses will naturally fall into the deepest samskaras we've created in our minds. This is exactly why breaking a bad habit feels like trying to swim upstream against a powerful current. So, what's the deal? Are we just doomed to be puppets of our own programming forever? Well, not at all. And this is where the incredible wisdom of the Upanishads comes in. They don't just diagnose the problem, they actually offer the cure. The Upanishads are basically the philosophical heart of the ancient Vedic texts. They contain the direct spiritual insights of these ancient seers. And their central teaching is, well, it's pretty radical. They say the way out of the cycle isn't through doing more things, but through knowledge, specifically the knowledge of our true, unchanging self, the part of us that's totally separate from our habits and personality. And to get this huge idea across, they didn't write a complicated textbook. They often just told simple stories or parables. And one of the most famous ones comes from the Chandogya Upanishad. It's about a young man named Shvetaketu who comes home from his studies feeling very proud, thinking he knows everything. So his father, wanting to teach him a deeper truth, gives him a very simple task. He says, Shvetaketu, take this lump of salt, put it in this bowl of water, and come back to me in the morning. When Shvetaketu returns, he looks in the bowl and the salt is gone. It's completely dissolved, vanished. His father then tells him to taste the water, from the top, from the middle, from the bottom, and of course, no matter where he tastes, it's salty. And then comes the big lesson. The father says,
Just like that salt, in this very body, you do not perceive the true, that ultimate reality. But trust me, it is there. And then he delivers one of the most famous lines in all of spiritual literature, Tat Twam Asi, which means, thou, O Svedike, too, art that. The self is just like the salt, unseen, but it pervades absolutely everything.
Okay, that's a huge realization. Realizing our true nature is the goal. But how in the world we actually get there from here? Well, the scriptures, especially a text called the Bhagavad Gita, lay out a very clear two-stage path for this whole journey. So the journey is really broken into two parts. Stage 1 is called Karma Yoga, the path of action. But it's a very specific kind of action. It's about doing what you have to do, but without being attached to the results. The whole point is to purify the mind. This prepares the soil, so to speak, for Stage 2, Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge, where you directly seek to understand and realize the self.
And look, this isn't something somebody just made up last week. This is a core teaching laid out right here, in foundational texts like the Bhagavad Gita. It says there are two paths, the path of knowledge for the thinkers, the contemplatives, and the path of action, Karma Yoga, for the active people out in the world. But Karma Yoga is the essential first step. It gets you ready for the deep dive into knowledge.
And this verse from the Gita just nails the purpose of that first step. It's not about racking up good karma points or getting worldly success. It says the yogis perform action, abandoning their attachment, for one reason and one reason only, for the purification of the self. It's all about cleaning the mental mirror so you can eventually see who you really are.
So we've seen the problem, we've looked under the hood at the mechanism, and we've walked through the path. But what's the destination? What's the ultimate goal of this entire spiritual journey?
The goal has a name, Moksha. It means liberation. It's the final breaking of that cycle of samsara. And here's the most important part. Moksha isn't something you earn by doing good deeds. It's a state that is simply realized once the root cause of the whole problem, which is ignorance about who you really are, is finally removed.
So what does that even feel like?
Well, the texts describe moksha as a state of absolute freedom, complete fearlessness, a profound sense of peace. It's the ultimate aha moment where you realize that your individual self was never actually separate from the ultimate, all-pervading reality of the universe to begin with. So the big takeaway here is this. These ancient sages taught that true freedom doesn't come from changing our circumstances on the outside, but from changing our understanding of who we are on the inside. It all starts with self-knowledge. So I'll leave you with this to think about. What is one autopilot pattern in your own life that you'd want to truly understand in order to begin to change it?